Hey, guys, welcome back. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled people story. It had been a tumultuous journey living next to my neighbor, an individual who seemed to thrive on disregarding boundaries and asserting his dominance over everything in sight. From trespassing on my property to commandeering parking spots, he reveled in a twisted sense of entitlement. However, my patience had reached its limit, and I was determined to teach him a lesson in respect. As fortune would have it, circumstances aligned in my favor when my work shifted to a remote setting, granting me an opportunity to witness my neighbor's comings and goings throughout the day. Each time he left the vicinity, I swiftly relocated my car to a spot precisely between our houses. It was a subtle yet deliberate act to convey the significance of sharing public parking spaces. Predictably, my neighbor was infuriated by my actions. He stormed towards me, his face twisted with anger and frustration. "Neighbor, you're parked in my spot again." Me. "There are no designated spots. It's street parking available to all residents. This has been made clear to you before." Neighbor. "You have no respect for my property." Me. "I am not on your property, unlike you, who continuously trespasses on mine without permission. If you expect respect, you should extend the same courtesy by staying off my lawn." Hoping that my message would finally resonate with him, I retreated indoors. Unfortunately, what ensued surpassed any expectation of escalation. From inside my home, I heard an ominous and unmistakable sound: a chainsaw. Rushing outside, I was greeted by a horrifying sight: my neighbor brandishing a chainsaw, its teeth biting into my car's driver's side door. Glass shattered, seats were shredded, and even the gear shift met a brutal fate. To my disbelief, he wore a chilling smile throughout the destructive act, relishing in his deranged actions. Onlookers gathered, their fear preventing them from intervening as he posed an immediate threat with the menacing chainsaw. Fortunately, someone had the presence of mind to summon the police. The authorities swiftly arrived, ordering my neighbor to cease his destructive spree and place the chainsaw on the ground. Complying reluctantly, he was promptly apprehended and taken away in the back of a police car. The evidence against him was overwhelming, leaving him no choice but to plead guilty to his wanton act of vandalism. Ultimately, justice prevailed as he was sentenced to a year in jail and compelled to compensate me for the damages inflicted upon my car. Despite the potential for parole, I remained vigilant, safeguarding myself and my property by obtaining a restraining order against him. With his impending release, I could breathe a sigh of relief, knowing that he would no longer reside beside me. The next one is a pro-revenge story. I grew up on a country road with 4 houses. Our mailboxes were on the main road. Someone kept vandalizing the 4 mailboxes by driving through them and breaking the posts. I recall replacing the mailboxes a few times on weekends. After 4 to 5 times, my dad and the neighbors hatched a plan. My dad told me to go to bed early because we had a lot of work to do in the morning. After breakfast, we went to the mailbox, and there were the other 3 neighbors and their sons, along with a tractor with a post hole digger, railroad ties, cement, and a mini mixer. We proceeded to dig 2 very deep holes. Digging holes was very backbreaking where I lived, as the land was in a very rocky region. We only dug about 6 inches before we had to dig out a bunch of rocks from the hole. We took turns digging out the rocks throughout the entire morning. There was a lot of motivation, as this was the last time we were going to fix the mailboxes. We dug 2 holes, each 6 feet deep, and hoisted 2 uncut 12-foot railroad ties into each hole. We then proceeded to fill each hole to the top with cement. We added a crossbeam and attached our new mailboxes. After an entire day of digging holes and pouring concrete, we all sat back and enjoyed our handiwork. A month went by, and the kids and I walked to the mailbox to meet the bus. We discovered what happens when a moving car meets an immovable object. There was an old blue Buick Century with a smashed-up grille and a bent wheel, and nobody in the car. This was well before cell phones, so we ran to the closest house and told the mom what we saw. We went back to the main road and got on the bus with the car still there. We found out later that the highway ticketed the driver, a 14-year-old kid, and towed the vehicle. Now, where I grew up, you could get a daytime driver's license at 14. One catch: if you received 2 violations over 2 years, you lost your license until you turned 16 years old. The kid was ticketed for speeding a week prior. Oops, he now lost his license for 1.5 years. Insurance found out about the vandalism and refused to pay the claim, then put the insurance plan in the high-risk category, even when the kid couldn't drive. The kid's dad tried to fight it by saying the mailboxes were not legally built. Turns out mailbox construction is set by the state and county, and our state county did not have any regulations on county mailboxes. I smile every time I go home. After 30 years, the indestructible mailboxes are still standing. The next one is a petty revenge story. My child's daycare had a death in the family. It's a small family-owned place, so this affected all the employees. They sent out an email at around 3 a.m. I couldn't miss work as I had a very important day, so I scrambled to find a sitter just for that day. My stepbrother's girlfriend was basically the only person I know who doesn't work, so I called her. She said, "Sure, but I can only watch him for 6 hours and I'll give you my family rate, so it will only be $200. I asked if she was serious. She assured me she was, and that this was her livelihood, and she takes it very seriously. That she was already offering me a family discount. Please note that it was not her livelihood. My stepbrother has a great job and has always paid for everything. He has tried to get her to do anything to earn money, but she refuses to work and believes he should support her fully, including daily Starbucks, hair, nails, designer stuff, etc. Please also note that I had done a lot for this girl, just to help her out. The list is long. I agreed only because I would have lost my job if I hadn't gone to work that day. I paid her $200, which she demanded up front, to work for a little over 4 hours after factoring in the commute. Fast forward a couple of years, they have separated, they have a kid, and she is living for free in his dad's extra house, and driving my dad's extra car for free. The ex pays all the bills and necessities. She finally breaks down and gets a job because he stopped paying for her hair, nails, etc. She has a day when her childcare falls through and sends out the same request I did. "Can anyone watch my kid? I have to go to work or I'll get fired." I told her I could absolutely do it. Then I charged her the same bogus price she charged me. I told her it was the family rate. She cussed me out. Edit. Why would either of us get fired has been asked a ton. Here's why. I was scheduled to teach a seminar for about 400 people. This was extremely expensive to the company once you factor in all the logistics of closing operations for a day, etc. If I had last minute canceled, it would have cost them twice as much. Under normal circumstances, I can miss work for an emergency, but not during something like that. I'm a salaried employee, so I usually work about 60 hours a week. Taking off after lunch or something isn't a big deal. It was just the magnitude of the event. She worked a job that anyone was qualified for and was on the chopping block for missing work all the time. Also, it was not her livelihood. At some point before she got with my stepbrother, she was babysitting for a family for a couple of weeks, but they fired her for being unreliable. She recognized the position I was in and threw out a number because she knew I had no choice but to pay it. The next one is an entitled people story. Not me, thankfully, but a good friend. He had come into some money, so after setting aside a college fund for his kids, he's divorced. He decided to buy himself a toy in the form of a new Tesla SUV. Even though charging stations are popping up everywhere, he decided to install one in his garage so he wouldn't have to go all over the place. He got the station installed, got his car, and life went on. Enter one of his neighbors, whom we'll call, I don't know, Karen. Karen and her hubby had an older model Tesla, and like most people, used the public chargers for their car. One day, my friend came home to find Karen angrily trying to open his garage door. When he somewhat politely asked what the hell she was doing, she told him she needed to use the public charging station for her car, and that he was illegally blocking her access by keeping his garage door locked. When he told her that the charger was his personal one, she angrily rebuked him by saying that all Tesla chargers were public property, and that he was breaking the law by blocking his. I actually checked on this, and a home Tesla charging station only costs a few grand. He politely told her to F off, put his car in the garage, and close the door. A little while later, there was a knock on the door, and he opened it to find a cop with a smug-looking Karen standing behind him. The cop explained that he was responding to a blocking access to public property complaint. It took him a second, but then he took the cop, who seemed embarrassed to be there, to his garage, showed him his car and the charger, and showed him the invoice for the charging station. The cop nodded, went outside, had a conversation with Karen, who screeched something unintelligible. End of story, right? Well, one day my friend comes home to find his garage door half bashed in to the point he can't open the damn thing. He then does what any normal person would. He looked at the security feed from the cameras he had for his house, and there, in HD, was Karen psychotically hammering at his garage door with a small sledge. He calls the cops, and Karen is hauled out of her home and is facing charges of attempted break and enter and damaging private property. Oh, and my friend is suing her for damages to his home, just to plug in her damn car. The next one is an entitled parents story. I, 27F, got into it with my mother today, and I don't think our relationship will ever be the same after this one. To be honest, our relationship has always been rocky for years, but I tried to make it better after moving out a few years ago. We got into it because my niece, 13, came out as a lesbian, and she was mad because, well, to be honest, my mom's a homophobe, which got worse after I moved out because she became excessively religious. I said something like, "Oh, well, it is what it is," when she told me, and she did not like that. She started going on and on about how, no, it's not. It's the devil working in her, and I can't bring myself to see her again. That shocked me because I knew how my mom is, but to just disown her only grandchild like that struck a nerve with me. I then said, "So just because niece is who she is, you want to not see her again? You've been in her life since birth. How could you?" She then skipped over that and said something like, "Well, I'm mad because I told her that's not how we are in the family. And your sister pissed me off because, well, you and your sister are pissing me off because you're acting like this isn't a big deal. Niece isn't gay. She just thinks that because of something she saw on social media." She then went on to talk about how God made men for women and vice versa, saying that we're letting the devil work in our lives. I then said, "God made us all in his image, right? If homosexuality was something he didn't agree with at all, then he should be able to make it so it wasn't a thing, right?" She tried to say that it was the devil, but I cut her off with, "So you're saying that someone who devotes themselves to God, prays every day, worships and praises him in his name, is still letting the devil work through them? People don't choose to be gay, lesbian, etc. And niece is no different. She's still niece, and her preference and attraction don't change that. TW ahead. Brief talk of thoughts of suicide." Then my mom said this, and it just hit that nerve that I tried to ignore for years. "I'm your mother. You are who I tell you to be." Why did this strike a nerve? Well, my mother has been controlling over me for years. Growing up, it was on and off, but when I became an adult, she kicked it into full gear. Yelling at me, making me do things, controlling my money, not letting me drive, not letting me go anywhere, hitting me. And basically did everything she could to make me feel like I was the size of a rice grain. Hell, just the other day she told me how I was different because I didn't ask permission to move out, unlike my sister that asked, which I doubt by the way. I was 23, engaged, and tired of getting treated like I was nothing under her roof. So my husband and his mom helped me by moving me in with them. I can honestly say that if I stayed any longer, I would have probably taken my own life. That one statement made me realize that my mom wasn't just absent-mindedly controlling, she was fully in control of making me feel like an object. I don't know how to explain it, but it just made me feel worse. She then said, "If this is how you're gonna be, then I don't want to talk to you ever again either." So I took a deep breath and said, "Well, if it's like that, then I should tell you that I've been bisexual since I was 12 years old, and that never changed." She lost her crap. She hung up and texted me, my sister, and my niece in a group chat, actual copy and paste. "You three can just come over and stick a knife in my heart. Really, are you all trying to kill me? I'm so hurt right now." My sister said not to bring my niece into this chat, and then Mom continued, "The devil is so busy, but keep on entertaining him. Listen, niece's mommy, I don't give a flying duck." There was some more, but she messaged me privately and told me to leave her alone, and this is where I'm at now. So yeah, I came out to support my niece, and honestly, it felt good to stand up for myself for once. My anxiety is going crazy at the moment, but I don't regret what I said or did. Unfortunately, I'm sure my mom will die on this hill. Small update. Mom seems to have calmed down a little, but the first thing she texted me was a scripture and told me to repent, which was expected. I decided not to poke the bull, so I was honest as I wanted to be. I told her that I can say without a drop of doubt that God is pleased with me. Note, I'm not traditionally religious, but more or less a spiritualist. I basically believe that there's a little truth in all beliefs, even atheism, because I have been blessed with joy that I haven't felt until after I moved away. I told her how I loved her, but I was afraid of her for most of my life, to the point that I couldn't come to her for anything due to the fear of her reaction. She then did the classic parent speech of how I was fed and clothed, and how I should be grateful because she didn't kill any of us by being a mean mother, and tried to justify her hitting and yelling at me by trying to make sure that I didn't ruin my life. Let me just say that I wasn't a classic rebellious child or teenager. She said that I was messy and always forgetful with things, so I guess that warranted a slap and getting choked. Never mind that I was going through mental health struggles at that point in time and all that, I guess. But she never had an answer for when I was grown and had a job and was doing the right thing and still getting slapped for who knows what reason. I know for a fact that if I were in her presence, I'd be getting my ass beat and not this we need to pray attitude. I'm going to go talk to my sister and niece now to see what they are up to, and if they are okay. The next one is an entitled parents story. When I was 17, I bought a used mini bike and used it to get to and from a part-time job. Those who've read my previous posts know what my little brother is like. The boy my parents extra coddled because he was diagnosed as high-functioning autistic, and anything I had, my brother had to have too. And if I refused to give it, my parents generally took it. At least until that behavior was exposed to the public when my parents tried to cancel my 14th birthday. After that, my parents stopped forcing me to give my stuff to my brother whenever he wanted it. And that led to some extra huge tantrums from him. My brother would look for things around the house to throw to the floor and break, usually dishes. My parents actually stocked up on plates from secondhand stores because of that. When I got the mini bike, my brother was upset I would never let him ride it. But he's destructive with all his stuff. Every time he broke his BMX, I'm the one who had to fix it. Change a flat, new pedals, a new tire, new handlebars, a new brake line, etc. He's got a stunt BMX that he begged for, and my parents spent hundreds on it. But as much as he loves it, he never fixes it himself or properly takes care of it. He just calls me over, begging me to fix it. My parents got him the parts and have the tools, but he never bothers to do anything more than pump up a tire. And even then, he usually tries to get someone to do it for him. He's also very careless about where he leaves the bike. He left it in a neighbor's driveway and its handlebars got run over by the neighbor's van. He somehow destroyed the pedals and a new pair had to be put on. He broke the rear brake line while having a tantrum too. The tire was understandable though, since those wear out. But it wasn't hard to swap it, and I shouldn't have had to come over on a Saturday to do it when my brother is perfectly capable of doing it himself. So damn right I'm not letting him take my mini bike on a joyride, especially with gas prices being so high these days. The mini bike gets like 60 mpg. So what that it only goes 40 miles per hour, I only have a 5-mile commute anyway. About a month before my brother's 14th birthday, my parents called me, begging me to come over and fix the BMX again. Little bro had worn the rear tire down to its threads. I was annoyed, but I came over anyway because they offered to pay me. I swapped the tire and sat down for a bottled water because it was like 100 degrees that day. My brother watched me work on the bike until I was done. His helmet was on, so I figured he was just waiting to go riding on his bike. But the moment my back was turned, I heard my mini bike start up outside and then take off. Little bro took off like a rocket down the street on it before I could get out of the garage. I freaked out, but my parents tried to play it off. Though when I didn't placate them, they said they'd get my mini bike back right away. But for them, that was more like just waiting till my brother came back with it. I was annoyed and I wanted to call the police, but I'm not sure if they'd call it a domestic issue or not. My brother finally came back an hour later. He'd somehow not crashed. But the moment he saw me, he took off again. He drove the bike till it ran out of gas, and my parents had to go get him. To say I was furious was an understatement. But my parents basically rolled their eyes, handed me $40, and claimed it wouldn't happen again. I said it better not, or I'd call the cops next time. Not sure if it'd help, but they seemed to take my warning. I had to push my mini bike to the nearest gas station to fill up before I could go home. Before I left, I told my parents that if my brother wants a mini bike so bad, then they should get him one. But then they pulled a 180 and said he wasn't ready to have one because it's a big responsibility, and that it was too dangerous because it's practically a motorcycle. I mean, really. They just let him steal mine for like 2 hours to go joyriding to God knows where, and they don't want to get him one themselves? Whatever. I'm used to their hypocrisy by now. The last time I went to my parents' house, My brother was massively grounded and in his room for his birthday rampage I mentioned in my first post. But just to be sure, I pulled the spark plug wire off my bike before I entered the house. My brother was glaring at me from his window when I left. I just gave him a goofy wave and drove off. The next one is an entitled people story. So, for context, my sister's ex-boyfriend, let's call him NB for nice brother, and the father of her child passed away a couple of years ago. This story takes place at the funeral. Our families were very close, given that he was the father of my niece. Even though they broke up and my sister got married to someone else, we all cared for and valued him a lot. Now onto the entitled person. At the funeral, we were all sitting down when all of a sudden this lady pops up, runs to the casket that's about to be lowered, and starts bawling. It wasn't weird at this point since a lot of people were crying, but she was screaming. I didn't question it too much, but I did find it a little odd since I'd never seen her before. Fast forward to later in the funeral. The ceremony was done and we were all talking. My other sister, not the one who dated NB's sister, and I were having a conversation. I'm good friends with NB's sister since we're the same age and have the same interests. This will be important later. Suddenly we hear the entitled lady, EL, the one sobbing on his casket and causing a scene, talking to a friend of hers. Out of nowhere she says, "Yeah, I was actually going to get married to NB and take NB's kid from my sister, and we were going to move far, far away and live together." My sister and I exchanged a look that said, "What in the actual duck?" We had never seen her, and given how close we were with his family, we were shocked to hear this. I then asked NB's sister what she was talking about, and she said, funnily enough, "I've never seen that woman in my life. All I know is she was his co-worker, and they barely talked. He was actually often annoyed by her constantly trying to ask him out. All in all, she was outcast by everyone there, including NB's family, for lying about their late family member." Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already.